Weekend Collective on a Saturday afternoon. Tim Roxburgh and Tim Beveridge with you through until 6 o'clock. This is the OneRoof radio show, so it's all things property. It's also talkback, so you can give us a call on 0800 80 1080, text on 9292, and a regular guest on the Weekend Collective. This man knows property inside and out. Ashley Church, welcome along. How are you doing?
G'day, Tim. Very, very good. Good to see you again.
We are going to have a little word a little bit later on about apartments and whether or not they're a good investment. But let's begin with the thing we really want to focus on.
Yep. 85,000 Aucklanders, they reckon, have got a gold mine. They're sitting on a gold mine because they have not subdivided, and they can. Should they do it is the question. The pitfalls. Actually, I wonder if it is a bit more of a difficult decision that people face, because a lot of the times the people are sitting on these big fat sections, they may well have had them for a couple of decades, and they may have a lot of memories associated with the backyard and all that sort of thing. But so, I mean, how many people?
Backyard memories.
Backyard memories. Backyard. You know, that old apple tree. What would you rather keep the old apple tree or cut it down and take the cash?
I understand, Ashley, you have a bit of a horror story.
Well, horror story is probably a bit harsh. I've only ever done one of these things myself, and it went pear-shaped. And that wasn't actually related to the act of subdividing itself. It was more to do with the particular company that I utilised to do it. And that's an interesting point. And we'll talk about a few of the issues around subdivisions today. But one of the things that's absolutely essential for anybody who's looking to do this is they actually need to use, in most cases, a professional company to do it. Most people, it's just too complex for somebody to take on their own. There's too many issues involved. And in my particular case, and I'm not going to name them because they've changed their management and they've got their act together, but in my case, I utilised a company that simply didn't do what they were required to do, and it cost me a lot of money, and in fact, it didn't end up completing.
What are examples? Okay, you say it's too complex for someone to do. See, that's a red rag to a bull to me, because I would think, hang on a minute, no, I'm going to find out what to do, and I'm going to take one step, put one foot in front of the other, boom, 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 keep on going. What are the pitfalls that would await me?
Well, just to counter that, I mean, I can't build. I can't bang in a nail to save myself. Okay. So same principle. I wouldn't build a house. I'd get a builder to come in and do it for me. It's exactly the same principle. You basically need to get professionals in who actually understand this stuff. But there's some really big stuff. I mean, you look at these, and it's really easy to get captivated by the dollars and look at the sort of money you can get for these sections and think this is a gold mine. There's a lot of money to be made, and there is actually really good money to be made out of it. But there's also some pretty significant costs in the process of actually doing it.
Okay, we'll come back to this in just a moment. It's 4:09.
This is NewsTalk ZB Breaking News.
We're just getting reports through of a fire in Wellington, and we have a caller who is on the scene. Paula, thank you for joining us. What can you see?
Hi, so we're looking at Tanakori Hill at the moment, and we can see heaps of smoke. You'd be able to see it from the middle of Wellington. And we did see a fire engine trying to get to it, because I've actually been walking up there this morning and it's tinder dry. We can see the flames. It's quite big.
And so which hill is this again?
It's on Tanakori Hill. That's the name of it. So we're in Wadestown looking at it at the moment.
Okay.
Up behind the city.
And as far as how close people's houses may be to this area?
Well, the houses are the wind's blowing it towards all the trees, so away from the houses, but of course there's a lot of trees here. And it's 100 metres from the houses up the hill.
Okay.
And it's blowing the other way, so it's blowing towards all of the city, but towards all the trees, obviously.
And so you mentioned you saw a fire engine. Have you seen many more fire engines?
No, we saw a fire engine because he can't get to it. We can see the flames now, but he couldn't get to it. We could see him, and I don't know where they've gone now. Oh, there's a tree that's apparently just gone up. So we can send you some video footage of it.
Yeah, sure. So you were about a couple of kilometres away from your viewpoint.
Away. A couple of kilometres away?
Probably 300 metres away.
300 metres away, but we're looking at it obviously down the gully, and it's up on the other hill.
Okay.
And the wind is obviously taking it in that direction.
Okay, well, we're going to get a reporter on the scene as soon as we can. Paula, thank you so much for ringing through.
No problem. Okay.
Take care, and as we say, we will have more about this fire. You're welcome to ring through, and we can put you through to our newsroom as well, 0800 80 1080. We will carry on the talkback on the OneRoof radio show, and you can text as well on 9292. So we're talking with Ashley Church about subdividing your property, and there was a story out during the week that, as Beveridge said, 85,000 properties within the Auckland region, and this is not just an Auckland story, but as far as Auckland's concerned, 85,000 properties which have the potential to be subdivided, but it's not always straightforward. And what are some of the pitfalls that people might face if they're trying to do this?
So just to be clear what we're talking about first, because we use the word subdivision to mean actually two different things. We use the word subdivision to describe a big development of a lot of houses in one area, and so a developer will come in and they might build 40, 50 or 100 properties in one. That's subdivision. When we're using the word subdivision here, we're referring to your house that's got a big parcel of land that's been there for however long, that you have the ability under the Auckland Unitary Plan or whatever council you're in to basically break up into more than one section, sometimes two, sometimes three. So in doing that, there's a process that you've got to go through. You've basically got to get a thing called a resource consent, and that resource consent is the permission from the council to actually allow you to build on the site, and then you've got to go through another process before you can actually get to what's to certification, which is actually issuing you with what they call title, which means it's a separate property from the one that you originally separated it from. But the process of actually doing that, quite complex. You've got to bring a company in. They need to work out what actually is required to be done. That's different for every subdivision. If, for example, if you've got a sloping section, there are some things that you need to do to make that section suitable for building another house on that wouldn't necessarily be an issue with a flat section. There are council costs associated with doing that, and there's a number of them. They relate to different aspects of the process. And there are issues like, for example, whether or not you can actually build a certain type of house on a certain site. So just because your section's 350 or 400 square metres and the plan says that you can build on that site doesn't necessarily mean you can build a house on it. There's all sorts of other rules that actually prevent you from doing that in some cases.
How long and how much would it cost you just to sort out those preliminary aspects before you even talk to an architect or...
how long's a piece of string?
Well,
let me give you...
isn't that the thing that puts everyone off? It's
Yeah,
just like this bureaucracy. To me, it seems like it's getting a consent at least to work out how big your section is and what you can... It shouldn't be that hard.
Let me give you a snapshot of the numbers in Auckland, and keep in mind these are just Auckland because they'll be different in other parts of the country. Let's just say, for example, you're in the central suburbs in Auckland, you've got a piece of land which is worth, say, $700,000, and that's not unusual. The process of actually subdividing that by the time you finish will probably cost you somewhere north of 200 grand, and so it's not cheap. Mind you,
sorry.
You're still left with 500, but there's also an impact on the value of the original property. So the property that you've subdivided is not going to be worth what it was before you subdivided. So you also have to subtract that from the value of anything that you've made. So by the time you finish that exercise on that $700,000 sale of the property, you might come out with 350 grand.
Hang on, 200,000 for to deal with the council and get the approvals and the consent?
No, that's also all the works that are involved in actually doing it. So there's a range of works, and they can be anything from structural works around things like retaining walls if you're on a sloping site, right through to the infrastructure that's required. So there are things like
drains and
water,
sewage,
drainage, etc. And then there's a series of charges by council, including things called development impact levies. So it's a range of different costs that all contribute to that cost. That 200 grand's probably on the higher side. There would be cheaper, would be the ability to do that cheaper, but it's not unusual for that to be a cost of doing this.
Give us a call, 0800 80 1080. So if you've gone through this process, how difficult did you find it as far as subdividing your property goes? My wife and I, we're in that stage where we can't really afford to buy another house, but we're going to look at them anyway because it's fun. and then so you're sort of pretending that you could anyway. Just got to make a bit more money, and then we'll be
like shopping for a new car, isn't it? I mean,
we're researching.
Check out an Aston Martin; it's fun.
But we saw one place, and it was interesting. It was such a beautiful smallish house and an older home. And so it was on a property which had been subdivided, and so the owners of that home had split the property in two and built a really ugly new home for them to live in, I mean quite butt ugly, you could even say.
It's not an uncommon story, sadly.
And so they were living in the butt ugly new property, which was very substantial, but also on quite a small section, but a large house crammed into a tiny section, and then the beautiful home that was formerly their home they were selling, and you just thought, this is kind of strange.
Incidentally, they refer to those as easy care sections, and there's actually a trend as people get older to move away from... You might have had a big section because you had kids that used it basically as a playground. As people get older, they don't necessarily be wanting to mowing a big lawn. So one of the things that comes out of the process of subdivision is that you end up with a property where basically you open the back door and there's the fence.
Yeah.
So and for some people that's actually an advantage. So there are reasons that people do that, but you end up with these ticky-tacky little houses on much smaller sections than they might have been traditionally.
Yeah, and I think, why do you actually... I guess the money is good, but is there not a way that you could do a much nicer home.
Yes,
than
yeah, there
they
is,
could
but there are
do.
no. I mean, apart from the constraints around what you're allowed to build on a site, there are no aesthetic controls, and I'd probably argue there shouldn't be, because at the end of the day, one man's castle is another man's bungalow.
Well, you have these character neighbourhoods. I mean, but around the world, we do have neighbourhoods of a particular character, and you look,
Yeah.
I mean, look at Paris or London. Well, London's a bit more of a mixed bag, but I mean, is there a case in some suburbs where there are a lot of sort of beautiful villas?
So that does exist now. That does exist now. So a lot
we
of
need to-
developers actually have caveats on properties where when you build, you've actually got to build to certain conventions that are part of it. So there's a legal process that actually says you have to build to those standards.
Who's put
That's
that caveat on?
the developer in a lot of
Okay.
cases. Yeah, so not the council. The council doesn't generally get involved in this, and you can imagine why. But
Are there
but
any
developers
special?
will.
Are there any special character neighbourhoods that are not the subject, not the result of developers having certain rules about what you have to build? Are there any places around New Zealand where you think
there are
you
some older
we should have
ones.
some rules?
Yeah, there are some older ones. I mean, if you look at, for example, the caveats around heritage homes that came about as part of the unitary plan, that's an example of where those things prevailed in the past. But if you want to look at a more recent example where a developer has done it, looking at Stonefields, where that development the rules around what you can develop there are relatively consistent, and so those houses look relatively the
Like,
same. For
you can
that
have any
reason.
house colour so long as it's grey.
Pretty much, yeah.
Sorry, anyone in Stonefield, but I remember when I saw that going up, going, oh,
But it's interesting because if you take that to the extreme, you go to the UK and they're identical, and there's no character, there's no identity to them whatsoever. And I'm not sure we want to go there either. One of the things we pride ourselves in this country is we've got individuality. So it's about finding where that middle position is.
I do find if you walk through Stonefields or drive through it, it's better than if you're up the top of Mount Wellington
Yeah.
looking at it and you're like, oh gosh, this looks a bit strange. You know, this whole valley where all the places look exactly the same. But when you're through it, when you're on foot at street level and then the parks and things, some of it's actually quite cool.
and I do wish I'd put a deposit on that early development on about, well, I don't know, as many as I could afford, which was zero probably at the time. The hindsight, and it's funny when you look at hindsight and you think, I would have loved to have done that, and you look back at the time when you would have loved to have done it. If you're really honest, you probably might not have been able to anyway. Yeah.
Oh, well, pretend you could have.
Oh, yes, and I know that's what I do when I take go and borrow an Aston Martin.
Yeah. Good times.
James Bond.
You can join the program, 0800 80 1080, have a chat with us and a chat with Ashley Church, property commentator and property expert, who is with us as we talk about subdividing. And as I said just a moment or two ago, this report which came out saying that almost 100,000 properties within the Auckland region have the potential to be subdivided, which could make a lot of money for the owners. But there are difficulties. So how difficult have you found the process of subdividing a property? And as Ashley says, this is not talking about subdivisions, but subdividing a property.
Just while we're waiting for that call, the other thing that's worth mentioning here too is this is actually good for the city. So if you think about Auckland and the fact that it's growing further and further and further out, and people are having to travel further, if there's 85,000 homes within the existing borders of the city, that it means they're using existing infrastructure and they're maximising what's already in place, and that's actually good for the city.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want in any of our cities for there just to be endless sprawl.
Yep.
And that I think that people seem to think that it's either one thing or the other.
It's both.
As opposed to, I think that there is a little bit of have your cake and eat it too, as in you can preserve real character neighbourhoods,
Yep.
but also allow intensification. Because what happens if you just allow endless sprawl is that you talk about traffic problems and you think of it as being an urban problem, but traffic areas and what are sort of semi-rural traffic problems rather, and what are semi-rural areas like say Whenuapai and Riverhead, where lovely new subdivisions out there, but there was not proper roading infrastructure updates, so that means that there are people waiting to get onto State Highway 16, and their major traffic issue of the day is not say the Northwestern Motorway. It's trying to get on to State Highway 16 out in the countryside.
So we'd love to hear your stories. Have you actually slain Goliath? It sounds like Goliath, pretty much the David and Goliath, if you're looking at trying to subdivide your own section. But have you done it? How did you do it? And what did you find to be the pitfalls? Give us a call.
All right, we'll be back in just a moment. It's NewsTalk ZB, the Weekend Collective, and the OneRoof Radio Show at 4:21.
Hey, you might want to drill down.
Weekend Collective, Tim Roxburgh and Tim Beveridge in for Wilson as Wilson recovers from his nasty knee injury. We will be having a chat with him tomorrow afternoon to see how he's doing. You can join the program on 0800 80 1080. Just a quick word about reports of a fire on Wellington's Tinakori Hill. We have had some calls and witnesses saying that the blaze broke out in the trees on Wellington's city green belt and about 100 metres from neighbouring homes. There's no cause for panic. but we will have a reporter there soon, and we will try and have some more information for you about that. As far as what's happening in Nelson, that's still a very real situation, and the largest forest fire in New Zealand in more than 60 years. So the latest on that at newstalkzb.co.nz, and more in the 5 o'clock news. All right, you can give us a call as we talk property. The OneRoof radio show, it's all things property, and one topic this afternoon is to do with subdividing. So, lots of people sitting on a gold mine, but they haven't subdivided their properties. We have Ashley Church with us now. So, Ashley, you're saying that it's a good thing that people subdivide because it stops sprawl. Is there any way to control? We were talking a little bit about aesthetics, but is there any way to try and make that subdividing as good as possible?
Well, those costs I talked about before are largely tied up with what controls are in place under the unitary plan, and they're around things like view lines, for example, making sure that the view of your neighbour is not going to be impeded by the height of your house. And there's some quite specific dimensions houses have got to meet, which again, experts know how to do. You wouldn't necessarily be able to do yourself if you were trying to do it. In fact, in some cases, the council will actually require you to have a house designed for the site that you're not necessarily going to build, simply to demonstrate that it's possible to build on a site before they'll give you a resource consent. So it's quite a convoluted process. But when you think about it, it actually makes sense.
I've got a couple of texts here. One from I prefer you didn't use my name, so let's call them X.
Consuela.
It's always awkward when you read that thing at the end of the emails. like you read a long email and at the end says, please don't use my name. Right. But you only read that.
No, actually, he or she did say. Anyway, okay. First names, it's always difficult to narrow it down with. It's just a first name, but never mind. We'll call them individual one.
Right.
I developed a section, built 2 houses. Surveyor told me to build the 2 houses, then subdivide. Rules are different. I thought the Auckland Council fees are very reasonable. Was surprised. Build 2 houses.
I'm surprised they were able to do that.
What? So they
What he means is he actually did it before he had consent to do it.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a brave move.
Oh, that does sound
dodgy.
Well, brave, dodgy, yes.
I have, to be fair, I do have a couple of texts here who are maybe giving you a little bit of a hard time on the 200,000, thinking that maybe a little on the high side.
Yep.
And another one says, "I'm amazed there's anyone left." Oh, well, we'll just read out the love mail. I'm amazed there's anyone left in Auckland as the snobs have moved to Papamoa and wrecked it. Now, with traffic, they brought with them, with their bad attitudes, bad driving, but crime's gone up now, so anyway.
So the 200's a real figure, but your texters are right. I mean, it's possible to do it at a lower cost depending on where you are in Auckland City and depending on the type of site that you're on. If it's a flat site in South Auckland, it's probably going to cost you half of that. So it depends on where you are.
All right, you can give us a call, 0800 80 1080, and we've been asking how difficult you found the process of subdividing a property. I think we should throw out a different one too, so by all means, and this is a slight hypothetical, but what would you choose, a decent section or the cash? You know, what would you actually choose? And I think what you said before, Ashley, is so relevant that maybe when the kids have grown up and they've left the house, then you think about subdividing. Yep. But I was so lucky that we had the weirdest looking house before we'd bought it. It had a shockingly ugly, I think this is the second time I'll say but ugly, extension done to it. It was really pointy. Anyway. So
I can see it in my mind's eye.
Such an elaborate description.
I could draw you this house. It was the weirdest extension. So I mean that's the house there. So it's the traditional kind of weatherboard home.
So what we're seeing is a square with a house on it.
Yeah, and then we've got like half kind of a triangle as the extension. Anyway.
Looks kind of Picasso-ish.
To me it looks like the one from Play School.
And 1, 2, 3, 4.
But it was a really big section.
Yep.
So there was a retaining wall where I could throw the tennis ball against this retaining wall and it would bounce back in funny directions so I could practice my catching. There was room for the trampoline. There was room to ride the bikes.
Deeper issues at play here, Tim.
There was room to do backyard cricket. There was room for a basketball hoop.
Nice.
Like it was amazing.
Where was it, by the way? Which part of the city?
This was in Royal Heights, Massey.
Right. So look for this. If you.
Yeah, I mean, a funny old house.
Actually,
no doubt about it. But that was great. That was a large property that hadn't been subdivided.
I have a question. How much, people we've been talking about but ugly additions, second dwellings. How seriously should people take that? Because in a boom market, I guess people will just think, well, I can make money anyway, no matter what I stick up there. I could just stick sort of a box with 4 bedrooms and we'll make a fortune. But when the market's how much can you impact your profitability depending on what you build?
That's hugely subjective.
I know it's a bit of a setup for you, but...
Yeah, well, it comes down to who's going to buy it. So at the end of the day, 10 people can go through a house and hate it, and the 11th one comes through and absolutely loves it and buys it. So it comes down to personal taste at the end of the day. And that's why it's really difficult for councils to regulate this stuff, because it comes down to personal opinion.
Because as we're having this discussion, when I'm reminded it's not off topic, it's on in a way, but I remember when I looked at buying a house, I thought about whether it'd be better to buy a section and get a relocatable home.
Yep.
And I'm thinking maybe I dodged a bullet because
By not doing that?
by not doing it in a way. Because,
So by relocatable, you mean one of these ones that's...
an old villa that's been taken off, and maybe move it onto a section. But it sounds like that the consenting issue for that issue would be similar to a subdividing thing, would it?
Yeah, I wouldn't even want to approach that. It's
Really?
Yeah, no, I mean, when you think about what's involved in it and what could happen to the property during transportation and then reconstructing it, I mean, there's a whole range of issues. But people do it successfully, and there's companies that actually make good money out of it. But
I just go, that's essentially magic to me, that you pick up an entire house,
Yep.
put it on a truck and move it.
Yep.
We had friends do that in the early 90s, and they took an old Mount Albert villa and then took it to Royal Heights, near our very strange home with the large property, as I described.
the one on the picture.
One of the handy pictures that I've drawn. But people would knock on the door saying, is this one of the original houses in the area? And it was not. All right. 9292 if you want to text through. 0800 80 1080, thinking about subdividing. So what would you choose, the decent section or the cash? Any more text through, Beveridge, on 9292?
Well, we've got a few opinions. Yeah, I'd love to hear your calls as well. But here's one that, honestly, if I had a choice, I would never buy a house that's subdivided. Way too much hassle with driveway problems. Oh, there's the driveways. If a shared drive, also no section, I'd go country. And this is from a city guy all my life, but hate what is happening in this country. And basically somebody's just hating this whole subdivision thing, but we're going to have to get used to it, aren't we?
Look, I get that. And to be fair, he's talking about it as if it's a new thing. In fact, there's a lot of these things that have been built over the last 30 years throughout Auckland. So I mean, often when you're looking at a property, it's been subdivided at some stage in the past. It's just that you don't recognise it because it's developed and it's got trees and it looks mature. But this is not a new thing. It's been going on for a long time. The difference here is there's a real push to do it under the new unitary plan.
All right, we will take a short break. You can be on with us and with Ashley Church on 0800 80 1080 9292 on the text. And before 5, we'll also take a look at whether or not you trust apartments as an investment. It's NewsTalk ZB at 28 to 5. 23 minutes now to 5. Let's go back to the talkback. 0800 80 1080. You can also text on 9292. Warwick, hello.
Afternoon, gents. How are you?
Very good. You're on with Ashley Church, also with Tim Beveridge, and you wanted to talk about subdividing properties.
Yeah, the subdivision one. I didn't do it in the city of sin and degradation. I was born there, but, pity I didn't buy something there before I left in the 70s. But did it down in the Waikato in Hamilton, and actually divided up picked up a 1,200 square metre section, which could be cut by taking a piece off the one I currently had. I could do, cut 4 up out of it. And the best piece of advice to my mind of anybody doing it is watch the people you employ to help. Don't try to do it yourself, because as he raised earlier, it's a complex thing, and by God, there's a hell of a lot of pitfalls in it. I picked the wrong guy to do it. I thought he was good and thought he was experienced in it. He had done a few, but was a bit slap happy in the way he did it. But
Warwick, do you mind me asking, did you make $1 out of it?
Oh yes, yeah, I did. I still made the $1 out of it, but the grief that I sort of had with the guy sort of spoilt that a wee bit.
Would you do it again?
Yes, but I would employ somebody as I also just built a new house recently. Yep. And if I was going to do it, I wouldn't use a group home thing. I'd get a really good carpenter who I could trust and say to him, okay, you'll be the project manager and I'll pay you the 10 grand or 20 grand you want to do it, because I think it's worth it.
And last question, and we're doing this the wrong way around, but last question for you from me is in terms of the property that you actually subdivided, what impact did it have on the value of that property once you completed the subdivision?
There was absolutely no comparison going from one house that was, about $500,000 to 3 sections that were worth about $300,000 a piece,
Right.
and then one of them already had a house on it, so sold that place off and virtually paid for the original.
Right. Good
So,
stuff. Well done.
it worked out well in that, but it was the grief. And I must admit, I am absolutely surprised at the number of tradespeople these days, or so-called tradespeople, that haven't got, what would I say, the pride in their work. They sort of say, oh, yeah, well, that's okay, that's under industry standards, and walk away. And you know that paint job or that concrete job is not the way it bloody ought to be. But how do you tell somebody to come and take, 30 square metres of concrete away because it looks bloody awful?
Actually, that's one of the things that the planning laws don't really worry about is aesthetics. So long as it follows the rules in terms of structural.
Yeah, yes and no.
A pretty job doesn't necessarily fail, does it?
Well,
an ugly job.
So aesthetically, in terms of, as we've so well pointed out with you, there's no issues. But in terms of the quality of the job and works, right, there probably are some tradesmen who don't have the same commitment to excellence. And as a result of that, we've increasingly regulated that industry over the last few years to make up for that by making sure that there are certain minimum standards.
How do you choose a company? Because the company that does it, obviously it's going to be a lot of money that they're responsible and part of your life.
So
How do
based
you
on
choose a
my
company?
experience and based on Warwick's experience, I would suggest don't just take the glossy website as an indication. Go and ask them for endorsements and testimonials. Go and talk to people who've used that same company and be very, very sure, because this is a big investment, a big commitment, and if it goes wrong, it can go spectacularly wrong.
You can give us a call on 0800 80 1080. A couple of things we've been talking about with subdividing of properties. One is how difficult the process is if you've been through it like Warwick has. But also, what would you choose? A decent section or the cash? You may have been in that situation. We'd love to hear from you. You can text as well on 9292.
Also got an email backing up Ashley's talk about the cost. It says, have just had an estimate to subdivide my section into 3 lots in West Auckland from a specialist company who essentially take care of the lot for you. That has come in at around 190,000. Have been told this could easily increase after geotech report comes through with engineers' fees, special consultants. Not to mention my nearest stormwater connection is across the road, so we'll need 2 thrust pipes, which means traffic management. It just goes on.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the reason you need to use a specialist, because you couldn't do this stuff yourself if you were trying to
see, there's going to be some people in good old New Zealand listening right now with the good old DIY mentality, be like, I'm going to do it myself.
Good luck. Good luck with that.
Okay, a quick word also about apartments, and increasingly apartments being built in New Zealand, and hopefully increasingly actually good ones. But do you trust apartments as an investment? And Ashley, if somebody asks you that question, they're thinking, okay, maybe don't have enough money to buy a house, but I'm nervous that buying an apartment might not be a good investment. What would you say to them?
Yeah, it's an interesting prejudice. I mean, they've come of age certainly over this last property boom. Back in the early 2000s, there was quite a bit of resistance to them, both in terms of buyers and also the banks had some hesitation around them. That's really changed over the last 5 or 6 years, 6 or 7 years. And so there is much more of an acceptance that apartments are part of the pantheon of property. What does change is that the bank's appetite for loans, or when it's pulling back on loans, it does tend to hit apartments first for a range of reasons. But as an investment, look, I don't think they're a problem.
How do you choose an apartment? They all look good on the plans, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, apartments always look great, and you think, oh, that looks wonderful. And the sophistication of computer imagery now, they can almost give a rendering which looks pretty much lifelike, photo-like. But, you see those developments. I've seen ones where you remember them being advertised, you remember how good they looked, and about 5 years later, you'd be thinking, I need to move.
Yep. Or the washing hanging out on level 4 from one of the neighbours' property. Yeah, I mean, all of that stuff. That's true of any development. I mean, they're always made to look as good as they possibly can. But at the end of the day, with an investment, if indeed that's why people are looking at them, it's the numbers. It's whether the numbers stack up or not. So that other stuff, although it's important, doesn't matter in terms of its suitability as an investment.
I guess I was thinking in terms of living in them, I guess, and that's the mistake. Yeah,
fair call.
As far as the numbers are, I mean, the average price, so some stats out in the past few days, and it's interesting seeing how Wellington and Christchurch compare to Auckland as far as the average price for an apartment. Reading here, so Wellington had an increase of 1.1%, taking the average to $403,000.
Yep.
Christchurch had a rise of 13.6%. I think this is over the course of the year. Christchurch went up 13.6%. So the average apartment price in Christchurch is $466,000 compared to Wellington 403. I find that surprising.
Yeah, so putting that into a longer term context, and I go on, as you guys know, about how property doubles in value every 10 years, and it's a mantra I've been pushing for a very long time, and it usually makes people spit their cornflakes. But if you think of those apartments 10 years ago, you were paying 175, 180, 200,000 for an apartment, and they're now worth, according to those figures, Tim, in those locations,
over
upwards,
400.
Yeah.
And eventually, when you got $1 million properties in Auckland, does that doubling in house prices, does that start to become a bit tough just because, double 200,000 is 200,000, which feels a lot less. I know that there are other considerations, but $1 million to $2 million.
Look, you would think so, but
insane.
I remember standing out in Botany Downs in Auckland back in 2007, 2008 when they were selling those houses for $900,000. For $450,000 to $500,000, and talking at the time about them doubling, and people just rejecting the idea that they'd be worth $1 million. Well, they're probably worth 1.2, 1.3 now. So yes, the idea of it in your head is difficult to get around, but by the time that 10 years passes, you've acclimatized yourself to it, and it happens.
So Auckland's average apartment price is $436,000. So Christchurch $466 and Wellington $403. So Christchurch out of the three is the most expensive. I would have thought maybe Wellington would have been because of the topography and the fact that Wellington does have a history of good apartments. Rentals in Wellington are very expensive.
I think what's probably a better indication there is that the Auckland figure is probably based on oversupply. So there's a lot of apartments and there's more coming on tap, and so that's probably kept the prices down, whereas those are probably reasonably good returns on Christchurch and Wellington.
And I'm just guessing, not being an expert, but I would imagine there are a lot more new apartments in Christchurch which would have a higher value. Would that be right?
Yeah, not as many as you would think, because
Really?
Christchurch has got a problem with oversupply overall at the moment, and that's actually what's kept their prices relatively flat right throughout the boom. And the reason for that is because they built really quickly after the earthquake. And so, in fact, if you wanted an example of how you keep prices flat, you do what Christchurch did. You build more houses than you need.
0800 80 1080. Do you trust apartments as an investment? Peter, welcome along.
There you go, guys. How are you?
Yeah, very good.
Peter?
Hey, look, I'm thinking about buying an apartment as an investment in North Shore of Auckland.
Is that the question?
Yeah, that's silence is real, isn't it? Well, I'm an amateur, but I've cashed up. I've got no mortgage. But we've got a good house that's mortgage free. I don't think the bank will be any problem. But sure.
You going for a run, Peter? What's happening there? You're a little out of breath.
Yeah, no, I'm walking.
Excited about your purchase?
Good stuff. Yep, good.
Any sort of pitfalls looking into that sort of thing?
Oh, only the typical stuff that you would look for with any property, making sure that the apartment building that you're looking at for any particular property is sound, that it's got a good reputation, that there's no issues with it, and there's been all manner of issues with apartment buildings in Auckland and Wellington and Christchurch over the last 10 or 15 years. And just making sure that the numbers stack up in terms of a return. And that's particularly important in a market that we're in at the moment where there's virtually no capital growth in Auckland. So you're not going to get any growth in the value of that property for 5 or 6 years. So you need to make sure the rental return's commensurate with what you're actually paying for it.
Yeah, I mean, but it's pretty hard to get. The return will be up to 4%, which I know is not huge, but...
well, that's going to cost you money, because the cost of money is going to take up most of that, and then you've still got other costs on top of it. So if you're buying on that basis where you're actually negatively geared, then you need to be prepared to be in it for the long haul, because it's not going to start going up in value again until early 2020s.
Yeah, no, I'll look at it as long haul for a retirement.
No, fair call. Well, in that case,
I'm in my early 50s, so.
Yep.
All right, Peter. Well, good luck for it. Thank you very much for the call. 0800 80 1080. If you're quick, you can sneak on. You can text as well, 9292.
Actually, just someone adding a comment on the relocatable houses. Says nearly 10% of Waiheke Island houses began life in the city. Relocatables have for decades been the cheapest way to erect a house on the island.
How do they get them out there?
3 in progress right now. On a barge, I guess. I don't know. Factory houses regularly come up from Huntly in Cambridge, says Huia. Actually, I imagine in the old days of Waiheke, I don't know, what would the rules have been out there? Wasn't it a bit lawless? I don't know. Back in the good old days, you get it. I still remember my flatmate when I was at varsity, 20 years or so, 25 years ago. was buying sections on Waiheke and had bought one when he was a teenager for about $1,500.
Right.
And I remember thinking, what's going to happen with that? You just buy a piece of farmland, but of course it's probably worth. I think he's done all right.
Yeah.
He's done all right.
All right, we will take a break, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at something which is on the OneRoof website, and this is described as possibly the most 70s house in New Zealand. How sensational, and it can be yours. We'll explain more in a moment. It's 11 minutes to 5. NewsTalk ZB in the Weekend Collective at 8 minutes to 5. Tim Roxburgh and Tim Beveridge and Ashley Church with you for the OneRoof radio show. And just before we take another call, do check out the OneRoof website, oneroof.co.nz, and then do a / and look at Hot List. And these are the hot properties that they have on their website this week, including one which I really wanted to draw your attention to, because you know me. Ashley, you've been on the show a few times. You may have picked up that I'm sort of really thematically a 70s guy.
I have.
Yeah.
Including your dress.
My spiritual...
Yep.
His style of attire rather than his dress.
I was
confused the listeners.
The caftan.
I was born in 81, but very much the 70s is my decade. And there is a home which is being variously described as New Zealand's funkiest house, but then also I'm seeing another headline saying it's New Zealand's most 70s home. Right. And everything from the wallpaper to the orange chairs which swivel to the orange bench tops in the kitchen. This house would have embarrassed people in the 90s,
right? Because
it was so old.
Now it's trendy again,
and now it is so cool.
I know. What's with that?
And
I've got clothing like that.
I'm seeing loads of orange and brown features in the decor. This is so cool. Anyway, if you do want to see more, and it's a home in Rotorua which is on the market. oneroof.co.nz / hot list, the most 70s home in New Zealand. We can sneak in one final call. John, you're on with Ashley. What did you want to say?
I was listening with interest to the valuation of apartment buildings and whatever, but I see no discussion at all picking up what are the body corporate costs, what is the pool of body corporate funds that are in the body corporate pool, who owns them on transfer, what escalations of prices coming in, and
Okay, we better stick to one question there, John, because we're running out of time. Ashley, what would you say?
It's a good question, and it's one of a whole range of things. I think, as I said before to Warwick, or to Peter, it's about addressing all of those issues. That would be one. There's a whole range of others. It's about doing your due diligence before you actually buy a property and making sure that all those things tick the boxes.
Excellent. Thank you as always, Ashley.
Very welcome.
Great fun to have you here, and Ashley Church, property commentator, at 5 minutes to 5. And do you have any children, Ashley? I can't remember.
I have 5 children and 9 grandchildren, believe it or not.
Wow.
I do.
My goodness.
I know, I look younger than I am.
Well, you should...
I don't then.
No, you look all right. Actually,
doing well. He's doing very well.
You must have had children, in your teens just about.
Well, in fact, I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, stay listening, because we have our parenting hour next.
Right.
You don't have to be our guest expert on it.
I'm past all that.
But you can certainly listen to it. We're talking parenting next, and we've got Emily Wrights with us, the author and the blogger, and wondering what you should buy new if you're expecting a baby.
It's very, very relevant for you there, Timbo. Actually, it's one of those debates. I've got this idea that the dads want to buy the second-hand stuff, but the mums, it's like, we're only having you for my baby, and that's it. And I guess what do you need to buy? Because there's a whole industry out there trying to part you from your cash. Don't do it.
Yeah, I'm certainly in favour of the second-hand.
Baby? Or?
First-hand baby, second-hand gear.
You're in for some fun discussions, boy.
Okay, so
it's a treat.
We're going to take a look at that, but we want to get your thoughts too on 0800 80 1080. Text us 9292. News is next, parenting right after that, here on the Weekend Collective.
You've been scared of love and what it did to you. You don't have to run.